People who objected at a wedding. What happened? My dad marrying his third wife. My stepbrother and I were in the wedding party. He was about 6. I was 10. The preacher asks if anyone objects, and my brother raises his hand so very politely. My dad asks why, and my stepbrother replies, "Because I want you to promise to take me fishing whenever I want." First, my cousin was marrying a Korean guy she went to grad school with. His family had come in from abroad and were sitting all together on one side of the room. When they got to the objection part, this Korean girl yells out no and stands up and starts screaming in Korean at the groom. As everyone is trying to figure out what the hell is going on, an old lady calmly walks up to the girl and slaps her face. The girl starts sobbing as some more older women grab her and pull her outside. The explanation was that she was just a drunk friend that didn't want him marrying an American. Found out later that the girl was actually a childhood sweetheart that was screaming how the groom promised to marry her, which was awkward since the two were related to each other in some way, was not quite sure how. Anyway, cousin and her husband are quite happy, so no harm in the end. My wife's uncle, who owned the farm we were getting married, stood up at the objection part. Immediately, his son, who was the man of honor, yelled at him to sit down. To his credit, he did for about 12 seconds, then stood up again. He objected because there was an enormous storm coming up the driveway and about to smack the ceremony, and all of our hurrying. Couldn't beat it. My wife made it inside before getting drenched. No one else did. Got married inside instead. A family member paid some kid $20 to run in and say, "Daddy, don't marry that woman," like it was his child. Did not go over well as a prank at all. I was at the wedding of that rare beast, a work colleague who was actually a good friend as well. Only a couple of work people were invited by her, including a guy we'll call Matt, because that is his name. Matt and the bride had dated for a while a few years ago, but had remained good friends after. So the ceremony starts. No sign of Matt. We get to the bit, "Does anyone have any lawful objections etc," and the church goes quiet. Then the heavy wooden door to the church door bangs open and there is Matt, looking red-faced, flustered and upset, and you could see the thoughts run through everyone's mind. Oh no. And Matt limped awkwardly to a pew in the back and sat down quietly. He'd overslept and twisted his ankle running to the church. That was also no objection. No drama. But damn, we all thought for a second it was going to kick off. My friend the bride even saw the funny side. About 3 months later, 2 people objected. The best man shot one and the bride shot the other. We were married on stage at a pirate festival. It was awesome. Ex-girlfriend's coworker's wedding. The groom's side chick shows up absolutely hammered right when the ceremony started, screaming at him saying she's supposed to marry him. She was carried out by a few of the groomsmen. Ceremony went on like nothing happened. Find out about 1 year later that he was still cheating with that chick and another one. I was at a wedding where there were 3 parties: the brides, the grooms, and the groom's mothers. She hated the bride, thought she was not good enough for her son, etc. I was friends with both bride and groom, and they had to invite the groom's mom and dad, but they had the priest avoid the objection part of the ceremony. At the reception, there was a moment where the groom's father danced with the bride, and a few minutes later she stormed off the dance floor. The groom's dad had offered her $5,000 cash to walk away right then and there and have the marriage annulled. The reception featured a flambeau entree, and everybody was watching the groom's mother, half expecting her to grab one of the flaming skewers from one of the waiters and hurl it at the bride. They are still married 30 years later and have 2 kids, but I believe they are estranged from the groom's family for some reason. One wedding I was invited to, the bride was a friend from school. As the priest went to the objection part, everyone in her side of the family looked at me, and this made everyone else look at me too. I was weirded and later learned that everyone thought I had a crush on her and would be injection to the wedding. She was a Friday and DIAHD, no romantic feelings for her, and I was dating her sister at the time. No one knew. She's still married to him and they have kids. So I guess it's a good marriage. Distant relative's wedding. She was marrying a foreigner and the wedding in her home country was just a formality as she was already legally married. We get to the objection part and some dude screams out and starts sobbing and yelling at the bride on how she was wrong for not marrying him. Turns out the object was an ex she had before moving away. The ex was a really bad guy who left her to be a movie star, but became a drug abuser. He was pissed she was getting married to someone else. Here's a biter: her family brought that guy to the wedding knowing this was going to happen. I had a small chunk of my family boycott my wedding, not because of my choice of groom, but because of my choice of clergy. They even promised to pay for another clergy. I kept the clergy and they did not attend. After several years they are still spiteful and have burned many bridges aside from mine. When I got married I hadn't yet become an atheist and my ex-wife and I wanted to use the minister from our church, who wanted $500 to perform the wedding. We were both seniors in college and trying to do a budget wedding, so we said no, and the guy who was the head of the local sci-fi club got one of those online Unitarian licenses and did us for free. Had the whole crowd saying union, so say we all, when he pronounced us man and wife. When my cousin got married to her wife, her parents, grandparents and a few other older family members stood up and walked out. They didn't say anything or try to stop the wedding. It was just a symbol of their disapproval. My cousin was pretty devastated because she thought the attendance meant they had changed their mind and wanted to support her, but it was just a trick. At our friend's marriage, there was a storm building outside. When the "does anyone object" part came up, there was a flash of lightning and a huge thunderclap. The power went out, and by candlelight the pastor said "I'm not counting that," and finished the ceremony. They were married 30 years. Then she died from leukemia. The video of their wedding is awesome. As the story goes, my parents' wedding was officiated by my mother's grandfather. When asked if there were any objections to my parents' wedding, my father's parents rose and stood silently. This was not a surprise. My mother and my father's parents did not get along at all. Everyone knew this, so it wasn't a surprise. In response to their silent disapproval, my great-grandfather lauded their silent standing by saying something along the lines of the parents of the groom have risen in support of the couple. Thank you." It's unclear how the attendees responded, but my paternal grandparents left silently at that point. I never met them, but I think I'm glad I didn't. Two of my best friends got married to each other in July. I was one of the bridesmaids, and at the rehearsal I joked that I would start coughing or clearing my throat at the objection part. We've all been best friends since freshers year, so they knew I was kidding. On the wedding day, we're in the church and the vicar asks for any objections. I didn't move or make a sound, but I could sense the bride, groom and maid of honor, our other best friend, all mentally screaming at me to not make a sound. My mother wrote "help me" on the bottom of my shoe, so when we kneeled during the ceremony everyone behind us would see it. It was pretty passive aggressive, but she wasn't wrong. Marriage lasted less than a year. It wasn't verbal, and no one will admit it was 100% on purpose. My husband's grandmother intentionally made him an hour late to our wedding, hoping we would just call it off. She gave him directions to her timeshare. That was her gift to us for the wedding night, and where he was supposed to get ready, except she conveniently gave him the wrong one. The one that was on the other side of the city from both the wedding and the correct one, and that he had to cross Interstate 4, one of the worst highways in Florida, and possibly America, during 5 p.m. traffic on a weekday, to get to the wedding from. Everyone chalked it up to "oh, she's a senile old lady, she just got mixed up." No she wasn't, and no she didn't. She was only senile when she could use it as a cover for being malicious. I could detail many other examples, but I won't. What happened? The wedding started an hour late, so we lost an hour of the reception, and we are still married 13 years later. Wasn't my wedding, but at a friend's wedding, someone decided that it would be appropriate to reference the Family Guy genital warts scene. When the priest got to that part, the guy was politely but firmly asked not to attend the reception, and as far as I know, the couple hasn't actually spoken to him since. My mum's sister-in-law, my dad's brother's wife, rang the church and reception and said the bride and groom had split up and the wedding was off. They only found out as a different guest went to the venue to scope out parking and was told it was off, and he rang my dad. The venue had cancelled everything. caterers, DJ, etc. They didn't check with the bride and groomers what close family member cancels when it's not actually cancelled. Anyway, the wedding went ahead. Reorganized WW a couple of days. Different food than planned. Different photographer. Some of the decorations weren't there, but the venue really did try to put it right, and by all accounts, did a surprisingly good job. Anyway, nothing like a bit of family drama for a wedding. Not a formal objection, but my sister refused to stand in my wedding. Her fiancé refused to even attend, and my dad refused to give me away in the traditional sense, all because I was raised in an extremely fundamental Christian home, and was now marrying a non-Christian. I was no longer a professing Christian at that point, either. Mind you, fast forward 6 years, we are still going strong, and with the addition of a beautiful son, so they were wrong. I objected at my mother and father's wedding. I was a year and a half old and obviously didn't understand what the priest asked, but I screamed yes, at the top of my lungs anyway. Everyone just laughed and carried on, of course. My older sister's wedding in Vegas, groom, who is still my brother-in-law and is a pretty cool dude, made me a knife and engraved it. Had a kid with my sister. Nephew is also awesome, and they had their second a year or two ago. Sister's biological mother objected last moment. To give background information, my sister and the rest of my family do not like this lady. Not any of this lady's family. She is actually insane, and has had so many kids it's insane. There is also thoughts that all the other kids are incest related, as a good few of them have major and minor deformations. Along with the lady and the guy she had the kids with, look very alike. Anyways, BO mother objects, and starts spewing this stuff that she used before to manipulate my sister into doing what she wanted. My grandfather, who is 89 now, very scrawny, 6 feet 2 inches, and an English professor, pipes up and says, "I'm 87. But if you don't shut up right now, I'll put all 87 years of my fist into your face." To which the lady replied in a sarcastic tone, which caused my brother-in-law's brother and I to get up and escort the bad side of the family, if you could count that side as a part of the family, out of the venue.